Welcome everyone to the Coalition for Marriage YouTube channel. It is such a privilege to have you joining us if you're joining us for the first time. And if you're coming back again, hey, it's a real joy to have you too. Now, our guest today is somebody from the Australian Christian Lobby, Michelle Pearce. Before we say hello to her, let me just remind you that we are the UK's largest pro-marriage organisation, tens of thousands of supporters from all faiths and none. Though a lot of our supporters, the majority of course, will be Christian, many of you aren't. But the things we're talking about around marriage, and the whole purpose of our organisation is to support and promote the fact that marriage is the thing that only one man and one woman can do. That doesn't mean hate or fear of anything else. It's just that's what the definition is. That term describes what only one man and one woman can do. Doesn't mean other things can't take place in society. When you change that, it has important implications, and things happen down the road, and those things happen pretty quickly. And somebody who can tell us about that is Michelle. Michelle, would you like to say hello to our viewers and our listeners?
Yeah, hello everybody, and I'm really glad to be here talking with Dr. Tony today. And I have been living in London for the past 5 years. Actually, I've just arrived back in Australia 3 months ago,
Mm,
so very familiar with Britain and love the place and miss it dearly.
great. And so you're born and bred in Australia?
Yes, that's right. We just moved to London actually to pastor a church, so we've been
Yeah,
doing that, and we love London and we really do miss it. We're
yeah.
back in Canberra in Australia, which is quite a small city, but it is where our parliament is, and so that's why I'm based here.
And we were talking just a moment ago, the idea that because I think you were, as soon as you got across there, you did this opening talk, and you were lambasted in the media. Here she is talking about same-sex marriage and how she's bringing that up again, almost as if in society that's something you're not allowed to talk about anymore. That's been agreed. That's done and dusted. Leave it alone. And it's almost like a modern day blasphemy to even say anything about the parties to a marriage these days, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. But I think I come with an interesting perspective because it was 2017 that the same-sex marriage law passed in Australia, and then I leave Australia for 5 years. I come back, and Australia is a very different place to when I left it,
Mm,
with the gender
mm,
ideology sweeping throughout the schools. In most schools, you do have kids that identifying as the other gender and many that are actually transitioning now. So we can see that when you undermine gender at that legal level, gender being the
mm.
qualifier for marriage, and when you undermine that, we see the consequences like we're seeing today with the undermining of gender at every level. And it really is disturbing and
Yeah.
really tragic to see children are the ones that suffer as a result of this.
Yeah, and this is the thing, because so you represent the Australian Christian Lobby, and
That's right.
many. So we've got tens of thousands of supporters. Most of them, I would say, the majority are Christians of one flavour or another, if I can use that term. But we have a lot of secular supporters who just support the idea of marriage. We have a lot of people who would identify as what you might call cultural Christians. So they don't have a faith, nevertheless they believe that the kind of the things identified by Christianity are a good way on which to base society. And you've highlighted a really good point there. So whether you're of faith or not, I think it's really interesting that you left as the law was passed, you came back 5 years later, and you've seen utter complete change. And let's explore for a minute why when you remove gender from marriage, why does it have such a big effect on society, do you think?
I think the fact that marriage is the most beautiful environment to raise children when you have a father and a mother. And so when you take out that role and the definitions that we have for what is male and what is female and how that impacts the child's development, when you undermine that and you take away that, then it really does have consequences on the way that we see the best environment for raising children. And we know that family is the cornerstone of society. So when you undermine family and the beauty of it, and when you take away the recognition of it as the best environment for raising children, then that leads to family breakdown. And when we have an increase of family breakdown, then that really does lead to societal breakdown. So we're really on a mission, as Christians, and even those who aren't Christians but see the value of the family, to continue to promote the value of male, of female, of mother, of father, particularly for the raising of children.
And the consequences, I don't know what it's like, what your health service is like over in Australia. And we'll talk about things like conversion therapy in a minute because it's staggering what you guys are doing and we want to follow suit, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But, our health service over here, once you remove the notion of gender, that there's actually a difference and it's not just a social construct. There's, there are firm differences. There, male and female, and it's kind of immutable. And once you remove that, our health service is now talking about birthing people and people with a cervix, and it's absolutely disgraceful. But anything except the term woman, because you remove woman from the essential nature of a woman in marriage, you then, it seems to me to be the case, you end up removing woman from society. And not only that, but then of course, if two people of the same gender are allowed to get married, well, that means, shouldn't they be allowed to have children? Well, they can't. So then that turns children into objects to be bought and sold on the open market, which is what we're finding more and more, renting a womb, renting a sperm, renting an egg, whatever combination you need to buy and sell children as if they were chattels. Are you seeing the same sort of thing in Australia?
Yeah, absolutely. And even we have feminist groups rising up to maintain that definition of what is woman, because they're taking away what is sacred in terms of how we identify ourselves. And then we have men imposing on these women's spaces, which I know is happening all over the world as well. So there's a movement to protect women and protect our spaces and protect our identity and the things that are unique about women. And we know from a Christian perspective that this is the way that God had created us, very unique in who we are as male and as female. And when you are married, there's a beautiful complementary nature of that when men and women come together. And this is the most beautiful foundation in which to build family, and from building family, then you build society. So we know that there's an agenda, even a very evil agenda, behind removing gender from marriage and from relationship, and even from our scientific biology, has far-reaching consequences. And much of these consequences from the politicians and from those who may be well-meaning in terms of affirming the rights of those who might wish to identify as homosexual, not understanding the unintended consequences of what happens. But now we're seeing it with kids wanting to transition to the other gender medically, and much of the community are against the surgery that these young people go through to become the other gender.
And that's absolutely, and let's not beat about the bush. There's no way kids should be medicalized in the way that they are doing. There's no way schools should be secretly transitioning children, etc., etc. But the problem comes again as a consequence. Once you teach that there are these different forms of marriage, once you remove the idea of gender from marriage, well, then of course you've got to teach kids about this in school. So you then bring them up, you've got these blank slates, and you start teaching them all sorts of ideologies. And we've got a professor over here from one of our universities, an industrial economist who we've interviewed, and he's quite clear, and he's published peer-reviewed research. The more you teach kids about sex, the more sex they will have. The more you teach kids about different types of sex, the more different types of sex you will have. Yet that just doesn't seem to penetrate. The answer is teach them more and more and more.
And there seems to be this real agenda to sexualize our children earlier and earlier. And parents need to be aware of these dangers within the public school systems. It's happening all over the world in Western societies. But it has started with this redefinition of gender. And when you redefine gender, you're redefining your sexuality. And so then you need to define what this new type of sexuality looks like. And my son in year 2 was being taught the gender ideology. This was 7 years ago. And I had to take him out of school and homeschool him, because at that point we couldn't afford to put them in Christian schools. And that's a situation that many parents are facing, having to homeschool their children, or even get into debt just to get them into some private Christian education. So it's a very sad situation that we're in. And like I said before, it's children who suffer by this agenda that adults have to have their relationships recognized, to remove gender. But now this has consequences on the things that children are being taught and the way that children view themselves and the questions they're asking themselves about their own identity and their own gender.
And we've effectively redefined marriage twice in this country, because we've redefined it to include same sex. We've also redefined it again to have something called no fault divorce. So actually, the whole premise of for life is thrown out the window, because over here now, if either party to a marriage, I've been married a long time, 4 kids. If I just decide today I want to fill in a form on the web and divorce my wife, she can say or do nothing about that. That's the end. Forget
Easy
the,
contract to
the
break.
decades she's given,
Yeah.
it means nothing.
Yeah, I mean, that's tragic. And it is like the easiest contract to break, isn't it? Once you've made this lifelong commitment to one another.
Yeah,
And
yeah. There are reasons why marriages might fall apart, but actually, marriage is a hard thing, and sometimes you do go through rough patches. But actually, it's like developing a garden or something over years. The beauty comes from hard work and vigilant effort, and then something wonderful comes. And that's the thing which our, if you like, fast food society is missing out on. That if it isn't working instantly now, I'm just going to give it up and try something else.
yeah, that's right. I got married at 18 actually, and my
Wow.
husband was 20, and we struggled in the first few years because we
Yeah.
were obviously both
Yeah.
immature. But I just remember having that commitment to each other, and just thinking, no matter how much we don't like each other right now because we're angry and we're frustrated, we're going to commit to this for the long haul. And our marriage just has continued to blossom over the years, and we've been married 21 years now. And it's the best it's ever been. And that's my encouragement to young people, young adults that are struggling in their new marriage. Hang in there. The best is yet to come. And this disagreements and the frustrations that you're having is all part of the formation of you becoming, what God has intended you to be together. But hold on. And that's the message that needs to go out to a lot of married couples out there, isn't it? Just to stay on the journey, stay committed to one another, work through those difficult times, because the best is yet to come.
Yeah, absolutely right. And I don't know what your law is like over there, but we've got laws over here which protect you from talking about how good marriage is if you want to. If you want to say man-woman marriage is the best, it is good, well, we've got laws that protect that in society. And we often find people are getting sacked in schools for saying that. Teachers are getting sacked. Governors of schools are getting sacked. People are losing their employment. People are getting kicked out of university, all for saying, actually, marriage between a man and a woman is good. It's the foundation of society. But then those who take it to court are exonerated. And they're exonerated because the law supports your ability to say that. But there's this kind of cancel culture around anybody who dares to say. And it's almost like there's an effort to destroy family and destroy marriage and destroy all the things that constitute good in society, which just, it beggars belief, really.
Yeah, and there's no hiding that it's an outright agenda to take people down that go out with that sort of mindset and those sorts of beliefs. It's even come to gender, where you can't call somebody a male who's identifying as a female by misgendering them. That's now against our law, and so we're seeing people taken to court for misgendering.
Yeah, so let's talk about what's going on with the banning of so-called conversion therapy in Australia, because that's taking it a step further. That's saying, well, actually, and again, you've been accused of homophobia, so you've been accused of hate and fear of a whole class of people, which, from what I know about you, that seems unlikely, to be honest, as with me. But the nuance has been removed from society, because it seems to be, unless you wholeheartedly accept and celebrate, the only alternative is hate. And actually, there's a million miles between those two positions, and most ordinary human beings are somewhere between the two, and not really, either. And it doesn't mean just because you disagree with somebody else's ideology that you necessarily hate or vilify them. It's just not the case. I can't stand cauliflower, but I love quite a few. In fact, I'm married to somebody who really likes it. That's okay. I can put up with that. That's absolutely fine. Just because we disagree on something doesn't mean I hate you because of it. But there is that nuance in society, and your law has captured that now. So if you criticize somebody who's trans or somebody who's homosexual, and you say, I disagree with that, I think it's wrong, that's now a criminal offence in Victoria. Is that correct?
That's right. And they're looking at similar laws in New South Wales and in Tasmania. The Law Reform Institute there is also recommending similar laws. So we're looking at a national strategy and how to stop it from progressing. We're hoping that New South Wales won't pass laws that bad. But yeah, in Victoria, you can't pray or counsel for anybody that even wants it, that's even seeking it, because you're denying that it's a legitimate, identity that they want to have. So I mean that's makes it really difficult for Christians to be able to just speak publicly about this, or in their churches about the issue, to disciple people. But in Victoria, it even extends to people that are wanting to explore different types of sexuality. So you could even extend it to things like adultery, and we're recommending people not to commit adultery or to restrain their sexual lusts. That should be not allowed, because they should be free to express their sexuality in any way that they want. So it's just bizarre how far it's going to restrain our ability to speak about just genuine fundamental ways that we as Christians live. And we do constrain our lusts and our sexuality because we believe it's men and women, and that for life and within the constraints of marriage. So it's very interesting the way that our ability to do this is being undermined by the government.
And there's so much in that, because I mean, it almost sounds remarkable that those are real words in 2023. It's like, really? In a civilized country, we're locking people up for their words because they disagree with somebody. It's just, it almost beggars belief. But the funny thing is, it's one of the things we don't teach our kids much is what happened in Soviet Russia, what happened in Maoist China. In not that long ago, in the last 100 years, 100 million or so people were killed, not by war, but by the state, because they wouldn't capitulate to what the state was telling them to say, which is, it's quite scary. And it starts with things like this: denying the evidence of your eyes and your ears. And when you look at those regimes, the idea in Soviet Russia, for a state to have control over its people, it had to break down families, because families are strong, families are resilient, they don't need a big state, they can look after themselves, they pass on traditions from one family to the next. And the three classic ways of breaking down family: number one was trivialize sex. Anyone can have sex with anyone. Number two was confuse gender. There is no male and female. These are stereotypes, which you can just ignore because they're not real. And number three was you get rid of this, as you just mentioned, long-term relationships. Have sex with anyone. There is no such thing as a long-term. If you don't like it anymore, you just move on. And that fundamentally breaks down the family structure. And it's what we're seeing all around us happening today. And, I don't understand, Michelle. Try and help me understand why the people who are putting this stuff forward are more often than not, married themselves, happily married to somebody of the opposite gender, and are getting a lot out their marriage. Yet they're kind of pushing this forward. I don't understand where it's coming from. We're looking at minority numbers, and we're looking at pivoting society on the feelings of a tiny number of people, most of whom have been brainwashed. What's behind it all? Why are we doing this?
Well, it's a big question. And we see the buzzwords like acceptance and tolerance and diversity. And these really seem to grab people's, compassion and their desire to see justice for minority groups. And we do, as Christians, we're the ones throughout history who have advocated for minorities and for the oppressed. But these days, it's like that language has been used in a very different way by people really with a lack of understanding of what is the building blocks of healthy society, healthy children, and healthy families. And so I think it's a real ignorance to what is the makings of a good society, and also an ignorance as to history, like you said in the examples of Mao Zedong and China, and how they've come to be where they are today is a result of the taking away of these fundamental building blocks of society. And we're seeing the attacks on our free speech, and I think that does concern a lot of people in Australia, not just Christians. And we're now seeing that a lot of the laws that we're presenting and the wording that we're putting within our laws in restricting our free speech is very similar to communist countries. And people are waking up across Australia to see this. We just recently had the introduction of just a draft bill called the Misinformation Disinformation Bill is what we're calling it, but it's to label anything that could be considered to contribute to harm as misinformation, and they've related this to things that refer to the LGBTQI community as well. So anything we say online on online platforms about gender could be considered misinformation and then be taken down by the digital platforms, and this is being threatened to be put into law.
So our conversation here would be a criminal offence. You could be prosecuted for having this conversation effectively.
Yes, that's right. And the message to Christians across Australia, and what message I've been speaking about, is we can't be silent and we can't let this silence us, because the more that we continue to speak and we continue to be, have that conviction about man and woman and marriage and relationships and the good of our country, they can't put us all in prison. And so the strength will come in the community of believers standing together and say, we will continue to speak. We'll continue to pray for those who come to us for help with their sexuality. We'll continue to counsel them. And the more that we do that unashamedly, the less power that these sorts of laws will have.
Yeah, and so that kind of moves on to our what we do about this situation kind of thing. And we could talk for ages about why it's here. And there's use in that, because then it helps you tailor your solutions maybe. But, we can't, I think there are lots of different reasons why we got to where we got to. But one way out of this has got to be partly the churches to start actually encouraging, ministers, teaching their congregations what's going on, encouraging their congregations to be salt and light, and then people outside the church also standing up and recognizing already we're in a situation where it's painful for people to speak. Yep, or in my country as well as in yours, we get people who they might be exonerated by the courts, but before that they've lost their job, they've been vilified, and a lot of people are thinking, well, yeah, I've got a family to feed. I can't lose my job. I'll lose my house. I won't be able to buy any food for my kids. I'm just going to shut up. So on the one hand, you're saying, speak up, stand up. On the other hand, it's a tall ask to ask people to lose their livelihoods on that basis. How do we bridge the gap there?
I think when it comes to the crunch and when you're tested and asked what your beliefs are, you absolutely have to be honest with what you believe for the sake of your own integrity. And we're called to be God pleasers, not man pleasers. And it's that trust we have in the Lord that even if we do get fired from our jobs, even if we're persecuted, even if we are shamed in the media, that if we please the Lord, then that's the main thing. And it's having this eternal perspective rather than this temporal mindset of the effects that we have right here and now. And we're encouraged by the apostles who were killed for their faith, and Christians in other nations that are persecuted to the point of death. And so, yes, we're concerned for families and for our children and for our livelihoods and all of that. But it's having that trust that if we do put God first and we honor him, that he will take care of us, because that's his faithfulness and his promise in the word. The worst thing we can do is be silent because of the threats against us, because then they win. The enemy progresses his agenda. And speaking about the spiritual enemy that we have, which we know that's what's really behind all of this. But I think that the kingdom expands when we continue to be faithful to God and faithful in our belief and the things that he's taught us, which is about man and woman and marriage and the beauty of the relationships, that it was his plan from the beginning of time.
And Paul was quite clear, I cannot but speak of these things. I can't shut up. I can't not. And, the idea of offering yourself as a living sacrifice, which is your reasonable response.
Yes.
There are more things than jobs, and ask any of us who've been sacked, there are more important things. And your own integrity, as you mentioned, is one of them. But even for people who may, be coming at it from a non-faith background, well, actually, it was interesting. I interviewed Kimberly Ells, who's written a book called The Invincible Family. It's a great book, very positive book, because it basically says, look, family will survive. Nothing's going to destroy it because it's right and it's good and it will survive. How it survives and how quick that happens is kind of up to us. But she gave the example of the fall of communism in Hungary. It's very interesting because she said parents, once they could trust their children, not to kind of shop them to the state, which is what the state wanted, when they came home from their indoctrination school, parents would take their children kind of downstairs into the cellar or wherever and say, what were you taught today? Well, I'm going to teach you the truth. Now, don't tell anyone I've told you this, but I'm going to teach you the truth. And then suddenly there was this whole generation that grew up understanding the truth. And communism just disappeared like a cloud because there was nobody to kind of follow it. And there's that extent to which, definitely as Christians, but also as just members of a functioning society, you know, we need to train our kids up properly, find out what the schools are teaching them and correct them and say, well, that may be what you've heard in school, but open your eyes, open your ears, realize that's not the truth, and here's the truth in a gentle, honest way.
Yeah, that's fantastic, and that's a great response to parents of kids that they're really concerned about what they're being taught in schools. That they can go home and they can share a different message, and what they're being taught in schools doesn't have to define the way that they see gender and sexuality. But it is very dangerous at the same time, and so we have to work to reforming the things that children are being taught in our schools.
Somebody made a good nuance over here I was talking to recently about, you know, standing for what you believe in. And this person was saying, this was a chap called Harry Miller, who we've spoken to, who's taken the police and chief commissioners to court and all sorts of things and won, you know, and really changed the environment. But his point was, well, that's not for everyone to do. So, for example, if you're just starting out on your career, you might want to say, well, I'm not going to be forced to say things I don't believe in. But actually, you might want to plan your interventions very carefully. Whereas if you're at the other end of your career and you've got a bit of financial independence, and actually if you were sacked, you'd be okay, then maybe the onus is slightly more on you than on the boy or girl at the beginning of their career who could just be devastated for life if they got a sack at that point. I don't know what you think about that.
Well, I think that if you don't practice it earlier on, by that time you've lost the ability to really stand firm in your convictions. So it has to start right from the beginning, and it's just who you are. And of course, there's wisdom in that. You wouldn't go out, you know, just I mean, you can if you want to, but in terms of just putting your beliefs out there just because. But if you're asked, you have to respond in the way that is true to what you believe and who you are.
People in politics who have said, well, actually, I'm not going to say too much when I'm a junior politician. I will leave it till I'm senior. And it turns out once you're in that trap, that's it. You're not coming out of that one. And that brings me on to, the politicians. It's just unbelievable. We had an anonymous survey of politicians back in October 2018, and of over half who responded, they said that they were too fearful to speak their minds about these things. Yeah. So our lawmakers are too scared to actually say, of course I disagree, it doesn't make any sense at all, because they're populists, which kind of brings me to another thing we can encourage people to do. When I talk to politicians, they say what means a lot to them is receiving a letter from a constituent. Not a boilerplate letter that somebody else has written and they've signed, but a letter from their constituent in their constituent's own words. And that means something. And when they receive 10 or 100, it means even more. And a lot of people I talk to, we get the privilege of talking to thousands of people up and down the country when we go and hold meetings. But people say, oh, there's no point in writing to my MP. There is. They're populists. If you do it, if 10 people do it, 100 people, eventually it makes a difference. And eventually they think, oh, well, actually, it's not just the radicals who are writing to me. It's the majority who are starting now. So, do that too.
Absolutely. And one thing that the Australian Christian Lobby is privileged to have is connections with, we have local community organisers in every electorate in Australia. And so when there's an issue, they actually coordinate visits to their MP. So we have the phone calls, we have them writing letters, but also getting a group together and going to visit their MP. And we did this we coordinated a whole lot of visits for to protect Christian schools. So Christian schools' ability to continue to hire Christian staff and protect their Christian ethos. And this method works because, like you said, that's people within their electorate. They want to know what you're thinking. And it helps to inform them of the issues as well, which is before they would only be hearing one side. So getting the calls and the emails and the visits in really does influence the way they look at the issue.
And dare I say, for those who are able to actually get involved in politics too.
Yes.
Come on, having another prayer meeting is a great idea. We don't pray enough. But then getting up and doing something is a great idea too, you know. Why aren't we training people to be governors of schools? Why aren't we getting involved in local health boards from, you know, trustee basis? All sorts of things like that, you know. If you can, maybe the time is right for you to actually do now.
Yes, that's exactly right. And that's a key message that we're going around the country with. In my first couple of months here, I made it a priority to go and visit the Christian members of Parliament in the federal parliament here and asking them, what do you think is going to shift things? And they just said, it's very basic. We need more people. We need more votes, more Christian, you know, good people to vote the right way in the House, and to people that will speak from that place of conviction with courage. And so as I'm going around to the churches, I'm telling them this: we need more people in the House, and you need to be encouraging your people to join political parties, whatever party that is, because you influence from within it. And there's just not enough of these people to pre-select to then get on the ticket to run for the elections. So there has to be a movement in that area, and we're committed to getting behind it whatever way we can.
So what's your view, not as the ACL, of course, but just your view personally? Because one of the debates over here, and it's not just among Christians, but it's among traditionalists, is perhaps the small c conservatives. Yep. So because it used to be the case that our two main political parties, Labour and Conservative, they kind of championed family values, they championed all that sort of nationalism and that sort of stuff, but they argued about the best economic ways of achieving it. Whereas now, both of them couldn't care less about families, and they're both economically aligned, so what's going on there? So one of the questions is, do we need new parties, or do we need new people to join the old parties? I wonder what your view is there.
I think that at the moment we've got the majority of Liberals, which is our Conservative Party. It's very confusing. But shifting to the left, and then we've got Labor going further to the left. And so what we need is well, both parties to come more to the centre, but Liberals to be the traditionally more right-leaning, and they should return back to that. And so true Conservatives have an option, because true Conservatives are leaving the Liberal Party because the Liberal Party is becoming too left. So they need to become more of who they are, and their foundations coming from that conservative route. And so it'd be good to see them move in that direction. And I think there's a good reason for them to do so, because there is Conservatives in Australia that want to align with a major party, but they're finding it difficult to do so. But we're also seeing a number of other good parties rise up, and particularly Family First doing a great job on all the issues, led by Lyle Shelton, who was actually the former managing director of the Australian Christian Lobby. And so they're taking exactly the same views that we have, but seeing how they can influence it within the House politically, and hoping that they get some seats in the state and federal elections coming up as well. So I suppose my view is that Liberal will move back to further to the right, as they're moving more to the left, and to revision a more conservative party. But also the value of these minor parties as well, the conservative minor parties, that they'll get some traction as well in our community.
Yeah, and I suppose that the last piece of advice we might give people is to look after your own marriage, really. So your kids see your marriage as something worthwhile doing. People around you see your marriage as something worthwhile doing, you know. And let's not pretend that marriages don't need maintenance, because they absolutely do. And really, if you look at making it the best it can be, well, actually, people around you will look and say, well, maybe I don't want this crazy, hedonist, mindless, meaningless, no relationship, isolationist type of culture where I'm the only important thing. Maybe I want something where actually someone's committed to me and I'm committed to them for life, and the struggle brings about something more wonderful than either of us could ever achieve on our own. And let's demonstrate that to other people. I gotta say, it's a lovely thing when it works, and all we hear is the negative stories, but let's make it right and make it good and make it on show. But I think the idea that marriage is good for society and promoting it is good for society doesn't mean other people have to be marginalized. You know, adults can still do what they want in a liberal democracy, but
Yes.
let's not ruin it for everyone effectively by
Yeah,
championing the needs of a few above the benefits to the many, you know.
that's exactly right. Mm.
Yeah. Listen, Michelle, I could talk to you all day. I think that the work of your organization is fantastic and so necessary a day like today. I'd like to stay in touch. Every time something big happens in Australia, which almost seems weekly, it would be good to catch up with you again and find out what's going on. Only because you seem to be ahead of the curve, and things are going to go the same direction if we're not careful over here. You know, and
That's really
people,
interesting for you
yeah,
to say
yeah,
that,
yeah.
just because people think that we're following you. And
Ah, right.
my message when I came back to Australia, I was like, no, it's not as bad there. And I
Mm,
said, we're actually worse. And people are surprised by that. And
yeah,
so I hope that you don't make the same mistakes as we do. And
yeah.
but we're actually citing some things that have happened in the UK in terms of you're going backwards on some of the dangerous areas
Mm,
you went to
mm,
in terms of gender.
mm.
And we're hoping that we follow suit. So we'll see. Mm.
Great. Michelle Pearce, privileged to spend time with you. Look forward to chatting again sometime. Thank you.
Thanks, Tony.